Hello, my name is Benjamin Hart. I'm an American attorney and the managing director of Integrity Legal here in Bangkok, Thailand. As the title of this video suggests, we're asking the question, should cannabis be considered a narcotic per Thai law? And specifically a kind of narcotic per Thai law. Thought of making this video after reading a recent article from the Bangkok Post, bangkokpost.com. Article is titled, No Less Majest Changes in Coalition MOU. A lot going on in that article. The thrust of it is not exactly what we're talking about. In fact, it's not at all what we're talking about in this video. I'm going to quote one small excerpt here, quoting directly, the 8 parties would have cannabis relisted as a kind of narcotic and introduce a law to regulate cannabis use. So it's this whole notion of a kind of narcotic that has been vexing me, I'll put it that way, because the sole purpose of these changes, and if you go back, I was actually looking, I went into the search function of our channel and just looked at how long I've been talking about cannabis. It's been like 5 years. It could be like even more, like 6 now at this point. We've done a lot of videos on this. I've been following it really since kind of the inception where they started talking about it, industrial use, medicinal use, even as recreational use became a topic of discussion. We discussed all of this. So I've been really following this for a while. For those that sort of ask, well, why are you so on this? Well, it was an issue that popped up, and it's one that I find rather interesting. I think if it's not readily apparent, I think economically it's good for the country. As I've said in many other videos, I absolutely think it needs to be regulated. There was a regulatory act on the docket, if you will, in Parliament here in Thailand to go ahead and do that. Due to a bunch of political wrangling, and I don't really want to get into all that, it just didn't happen. So we're in this position right now. People call it limbo, they call it decriminalization. It isn't. It's legalized. Okay? It's not illegal, and therefore, in a civil law country, it's legal. In a civil law country, you need to use positive law to illegalize something. So as we sit right now, it's legal. It's regulated, as we've discussed in other videos. It's considered a controlled herb. There's licensing associated with it. I'll deep dive into that a little bit further. But first, I want to get into this whole definition of narcotic stuff. And first of all, let's go over to the OxfordLearnersDictionaries.com for the definition of narcotic. Narcotic, formal, a powerful illegal drug that affects the mind in a harmful way. Heroin and cocaine are narcotics. Well, it's my understanding CBD has no effect on the mind per se. It also, depending on how you use these products, it may have no effect whatsoever on one's sort of cognitive abilities. Yes, there are strains of cannabis that can have some effect on the mind, but remember, alcohol has an amazing effect on the mind as well, and nobody sits around calling that a narcotic. So again, narcotics to my mind are kind of like a hard drug, as it were. That said, going over to the National Cancer Institute, that's www.cancer.gov, this is a US government website, quoting directly under the definition of narcotics, a substance used to treat moderate to severe pain. Narcotics are like opiates, such as morphine and codeine, but are not made from opium. They bind to opioid receptors in the central nervous systems. Narcotics are now called opioids. So again, this doesn't seem really in line with what you would call cannabis. Just even in layman's terms, this doesn't really seem to jive, if you will. Meanwhile, I was reading another more recent article, again from the Bangkok Post, bangkokpost.com. Article is titled, MFP to Shield, quote, Registered Businesses, unquote. There has been a lot of concern. I'm among the concerned about, hey, people went out, they got licensed, they got their documentation in order, they've been doing these things legally, and they've invested money, and now this is a major industry that does provide jobs and is having a significant impact on the commercial real estate sector here in Thailand, to the positive, by the way. And, a so-called U-turn on this, it really is cause for concern. Now, that said, quoting directly again, bangkokpost.com, MFP to shield, quote-unquote, registered businesses, quoting directly, the Move Forward Party on Thursday assured registered marijuana growers and cannabis business operators that they are protected even when the new government relists cannabis as a narcotic. Quoting further, some new laws will be passed to control the use, production, growing, and import and export of cannabis, which is work left undone by the caretaker government. I insist cannabis business operators and marijuana growers will also be protected and allowed to go about their business as usual, as long as they have registered and have permission to do so. A proper announcement will be issued to ensure this. And this is a spokesperson for the Move Forward Party. Okay. Good news in the sense that, yeah, if you invested in this industry and you got your ducks in a row, you have your legal documentation sorted out, it looks like, this is going to be more or less looking like a regulatory change. That said, they keep talking about narcotics. And on top of this, a proper announcement will be issued to ensure this. An announcement? What's an announcement do? If you're going to do this, it needs to be by law. A law needs to be promulgated. Again, we've discussed this. There was a law that was up for promulgation. And again, not getting into politics here, but it didn't pass, even though it looked like it could have. It at one time had what seemed to me to be pretty broad-based support. Now, again, I don't want to get into all of that because, quite honestly, it's beyond the bailiwick of this channel. But the thing that concerns me is, it's just all these terms that seem to be used without a lot of thought, or I shouldn't say thought, but it's just, again, it may be a byproduct of this digital era we live in. People just throw around terms. And I don't know that they really think or are cognizant of how those terms can be applied. So, or should be applied. But at the end of the day, again, I've said it before and I'll say it again. I didn't agree with everything the last government did. I was very vocal when I did it. This was not one of them. This was something, the legalization of cannabis, and presumably that legalization was going to come with regulation. I think that was a good move for Thailand for a bunch of different reasons that I've outlined in many other videos. Now, again, I've said this before, and maybe reiterating it's worth reiteration. Much like alcohol, it might be good to look at cannabis much like alcohol, wherein alcohol in and of itself is not considered a narcotic. It's not, but it is considered what, for lack of a better term, sort of controlled substance. You have to have a license to sell it. You're not allowed to sell it to underage people. If you sell it without those things, or if you sell it to an underage person, there's possible criminal repercussions for that, as well as civil fines and penalties. Again, that seems like the more commonsensical approach, because as even folks that, the Minister of Justice, going back quite a while, sort of noted at the time that, pulling cannabis off of the narcotics list has some benefits. Most notably, they can essentially concentrate their efforts on going after actual narcotics, as noted, opiates, heroin, methamphetamine, these kinds of things, cocaine even, these kinds of things, rather than worrying about something that, if all hyperbole aside, it's not a killer. You can, argue the definition of a drug, but, this isn't something that kills a bunch of people, So again, the thing to take away from this video, and before I sort of sum up, I even saw an article in the Bangkok Post the other day, and I'm not going to cite it or anything. It was quite a poignant article, actually. It was written by a young person talking about dealing with the issue of cannabis with their parent, but sort of buried in there, there was talk about, well, there could be cannabis that's laced with fentanyl. Yeah, let's go after fentanyl. Anything can be laced with anything if you think about it. My point being, I think that there's a major drive, a sort of a scare campaign out there on this issue. And for those who are unaware, yeah, I'm involved in it. I've been completely transparent in how I feel about this, I think. I'm hoping people understand. I think that there is a middle path through this. There's a commonsensical approach where Thailand can benefit, people can benefit medicinally, people can benefit from usage of this, however they need it, because each individual may need, cannabis products for different reasons. The point I'm trying to make is, I think neither are just, hey, it's the Wild West of cannabis, do whatever you want. That's not a good approach. But at the same time, fear-mongering and, even really discussing the notion of relisting this as a narcotic, to my mind, is going too far. This framework that was already being set up where it's a controlled herb, you got to be licensed for it, you have to be licensed for certain functions with it, and then obviously selling to underage children, yeah, that's a crime. And you know what? Put some severe criminal penalties onto it, like really heavy stuff. Like, hey, you sell to a kid, you're doing 10 years in jail. Whatever. Put some stiff criminal penalties behind selling to minors, of course. Why wouldn't we? Quite honestly, I think we could do a little bit better on that score as far as alcohol goes, but nobody seems to be worried about that. The fear-mongering all seems to be over in the cannabis space. So again, as you can see, I'm sort of passionate about this, but I like to believe that I'm keeping my objectivity here. At the end of the day, cannabis is proven to be an economic boon to the country. It's, I think, proven to have been a shot in the arm to the tourism industry, especially coming off of 2.5 years of total shutdown in that sector. To throw the baby out with the bathwater at this point, to use a euphemism, but to throw the baby out with the bathwater at this point, I just don't think it's particularly prudent.